Hi and welcome. Thank you for joining us to talk about the Inclusive Energy Outreach Grant. My name is Nicola Gallstone and I would like to thank you for clicking on this recording. It means that you are one, interested in the grant, but two, really interested in supporting vulnerable cohorts across the state to feel empowered and take control of their energy use. But first, I would like to acknowledge country. I currently am recording this on Gadigal land, but the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water acknowledges that it stands on Aboriginal land, and we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and water, and we show our respects for elders past, present and emerging, and for those who are listening to this recording today. We do this through thoughtful and collaborative approaches to our work, seeking to demonstrate our ongoing commitment to providing places in which Aboriginal people are included socially, culturally and economically. It's great to see the interest in this grant, and I know that so many of you are doing important work with community groups. So today we're going to walk through the grant guidelines. I'll explain the eligibility and merit criteria and provide you with some tips along the way to help you with your project and application. We will also be talking through other support that we have made available to you. The guidelines can also be found on the web page. So once you finish with this recording, you can click back to the web page and find the guidelines, but also other useful resources that will help you through your application. So just to go through the quick agenda for the session, I'm going to start by giving you a bit of information about the programme and the grant. We'll then go into the funding, the eligibility and selection criteria. I'll talk you through the application process, including the online grant system, and then we'll go through the assessment process and what that will look like for you. So let's start by talking a bit about the programme. The Inclusive Energy Outreach Programme is actually a programme that sits under the Consumer Energy Strategy that was released back on the 16th of September 2024. If you want to read a bit more about that strategy, you can find a link to it on the web page. The actual grant and the programme itself is supporting the New South Wales Government's commitment to a fair and inclusive energy transition. It wants to build capacity within the community sector with a priority on the New South Wales-based community organisations, and it's delivering measurable energy outcomes to vulnerable communities across the state. The programme outcome itself is to improve energy literacy for households in vulnerable cohorts so they can make informed energy choices. So the grant purpose and scope. We aim to empower New South Wales communities to participate actively in the energy transition by improving energy literacy and access to trusted tools and support. So it won't surprise you to see that the first outcome of the grant on the list is to increase the participation in the energy transition, but also delivering tailored energy initiatives to support their needs. We also want to make sure that we're helping build capacity and capability of organisations so that they can deliver these outcomes, not just within the grant timeline, but also beyond. We also hope to see some collaboration. So we want to foster collaboration between community organisations and the government, but actually also between organisations themselves, so building networks. This grant programme prioritises inclusion and equity, which is very much why we are focusing on vulnerable cohorts. We know that energy vulnerability in New South Wales is generally associated with households that face disproportionate burden from energy costs or lack of resources to actually adapt to the low carbon transition. These houses are often facing much greater challenges or barriers to adapting to the rising energy prices, or being able to actually access and afford upgrading to new technologies like solar panels. We have recognised that these barriers face a much wider group of households than some may think. So let's jump in and talk through some of the groups that we are including for this grant. So we'll start with low-income households and social support recipients. So those on fixed low incomes, they have the least capacity to pay rising bills. Seniors and people with health and disability needs. So aged pensioners and people with chronic illnesses or disabilities often rely on electricity for heating, cooling, refrigeration, and life support equipment. So they often have limited income but much higher essential energy needs, making them prone to hardship. And then we have renters, especially low income and private tenants. They face a higher energy hardship than homeowners, which probably isn't a surprise. And they typically live in older and poorly insulated homes that they cannot upgrade and lack authority to improve the home's efficiency. Families with children, so households with young kids, especially single parents or large families, so they face high energy demands on a very tight budget. Single parents specifically have little flexibility to absorb these high costs. Then we move on to culturally and linguistically diverse and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So new immigrants, refugees and Aboriginal households, and they can experience both low income and poor housing conditions too. Regional and remote communities. So regional areas, especially drought affected or heat prone regions of New South Wales and inland areas, tend to have lower incomes and less energy efficient housing. Also noting Western Sydney's low income suburbs and far west New South Wales, they are both highly vulnerable to extreme heat and drought too. People in homes with poor energy efficiency or limited agency, so people living in low quality or rental housing. So they are intrinsically vulnerable because they have few ways to reduce their bills, just purely because what they're living in. And then people with who are living just above that eligibility threshold. So many households just living just above the government cutoffs, they remain hidden from the energy vulnerable often. So for example, households earning just slightly above the concession limits, they may struggle and have no access to any of the rebates and incentives that are available. And then finally, people with employment insecurity. So households that are vulnerable to both energy bill stress, but also employment insecurity. So they face a compounded financial risk, often struggling to maintain basic living standards. And the irregular income there makes it really hard to budget for high or seasonal energy costs. So on that note, let's just run through some of the key requirements. So the projects that you are put forward through the application process must be tailored to specific needs of a community or region. So flick back to the last slide if you want to just be reminded of those groups. Projects must demonstrate inclusive engagement with diverse and vulnerable cohorts, including details on how they will be reached. Projects must deliver practical outcomes that help participants understand and take control of their energy use and bills. And applicants must provide an in-kind contribution to be able to access this grant. Moving on, let's talk about the grant funding. So funding streams and grant value. We have $1.972 million available through this grant that we will be dividing between the two funding categories. So first of all, category 1, for the small projects, we have $50,000 to $150,000 available through that category. And that's for smaller projects that include lower cost activities. So these projects may include delivering face-to-face community energy literacy and education. So that might be through workshops, events, or even home visits. Or it might even include developing and distributing multilingual or culturally tailored energy literacy resources. In terms of category 2, we're looking at medium to large projects, so grants from $150,000 to $500,000. So those projects should have a much broader reach and higher impact. So these projects may include a multifaceted program with partnerships with or between smaller organisations that are coordinated and roll out all the activities. And these projects may develop strategic, scalable and sustainable outreach and energy education programs. So programs must embed energy literacy engagement, they must build capacity and foster collaboration into a longer term operation. to support vulnerable households. So let's talk a bit more about what that money can be used for. So first of all, the funding must align with the objectives of the grant. That is extremely important. But we'll just go through some of the things that get the tick. What funding can be used for. So talked a little bit on the last slide, but that face-to-face community engagement, energy literacy education through workshops, events, home visits, developing tailored resources, partnering. So we want to see partnerships, possibly with councils and community groups, developing tools, so tailored tools and resources to support that long-term outreach and education, and designing regional or sector-wide outreach and literacy strategies. And that's obviously for the larger projects. I thought it would also be quite important just to run through what we can't use the money for. So just very broad awareness campaigns are not funded. We want very specific outreach that is tailored to the needs of the people we are looking to support. Activities that are business as usual. We will not fund capital expenditure or ongoing operational costs, maintenance costs. We can't reimburse expenses that have already incurred before this project has even started. We can't cover existing debts or budget deficits, and we absolutely cannot, given it's a New South Wales based grant, fund any activities that are delivered outside of the state. The other thing to note here is the in-kind contribution. So applicants must provide at least 10% of in-kind contribution, and that 10% isn't just money. We are looking for you to provide in-kind through staff time, venue hire, volunteer hire, and there's a bit more support in the application to help you work out what that value may be. And if you also look in the grant guidelines, there's some additional advice there on how to calculate your in-kind. Moving on to the assessment, so let's look at the eligibility and selection criteria. So the grants will be awarded through a merit-based competitive assessment to ensure that the projects, one, align with the programme's objectives, but also deliver meaningful outcomes for those communities we're trying to help. It's very important that you are very clear and concise with your responses, and where relevant, provide evidence to support that response. And we look to see how you've demonstrated how, one, your project will empower vulnerable cohorts to make informed energy choices. 2, will reach and support vulnerable and priority communities. 3, will build community organisation capacity and foster that collaboration. And finally, delivering measurable and lasting energy outcomes. To be eligible for this grant, you must satisfy all 4 of the eligibility criteria that you'll find in the guidelines. Criteria 1, so you must be an organisation that is on this list. So we'll run through those. So you must be one of these: a community group or organisation, a New South Wales local council or local council group, an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander organisation, a culturally and linguistically diverse community group, a small business association, regional alliances or networks, not-for-profit organisation, peak bodies or sector leaders, or an organisation with trusted networks and capacity to engage vulnerable households. So once you can tick that box and you are one of those organisations, you also need to be able to identify which group, one or more of criteria 2, you will be supporting. I won't run through those, but you must have at least one. You may be able to do many, but you must have to have at least one of those organisations that you are aiming to support through your project. Criteria 3 is the applicants must be Australia based. And finally, criteria 4, applicants must have a registered ABN. So just to repeat myself, you must have all 4 of these to be able to apply for the grant. So once you've ticked off that eligibility criteria, we can move into the merit criteria. So this is the criteria that your applications will be assessed against. There are 5 of them. I'll run them through quickly, but we will be going through them in a bit more detail in the following slides. So the first one is around you showing us that you understand the intended beneficiaries' needs. Number 2, we will look at your project design. Number 3 will be around the budget and resource allocation. We'll also, number 4, we'll be looking at your capacity and capability to deliver the project. And also number 5, the impact that your project intends to have. Just to note again, I know I've mentioned it earlier, but these applications are assessed competitively, both against the criteria, but then they'll also be assessed against the other applicants within the category you are applying for. Moving to talk about the merit criteria in a bit more detail, we'll start with the first one, which is understanding of your intended beneficiaries. So when we're looking at the applications that you send through, we want you to give us the confidence that you have an established and trusted relationship with the intended beneficiaries. We want you to deliver a targeted and customized approach, so removing those barriers for the groups that you've identified. And we also want to know that you understand what specific opportunities, but also challenges there are for these groups. Merit criteria 2, so project design. So when you're in the planning phase of this, it's really important that you have some really clear objectives, because that's what we're looking for in your applications. We'll obviously then be wanting to see how are you going to deliver on those objectives. So really clear deliverables that ensure that you can achieve what you've set out to achieve in your objectives. We also need to be really confident that you can deliver within the timeframes available. So all of the projects that are put through need to have a delivery end date of June 2027, if not earlier where possible. In terms of project design, there's a lot of information online that will help you develop your ideas and your project design. This one is another of the many examples, but this one comes from a framework that was put together after the evaluation of the Low Income Energy Efficiency Programme. And it just talks through the 5 easy steps to take and think about when you're designing your project. So the first one is that targeted recruitment. In essence, by selecting your beneficiaries, you're already one step there. And it's just about identifying the barriers to participation and proposing strategies to overcome them. You're then thinking about engagement strategies, so building that trust. And encouraging emotional buy-in, so participants are motivated to commit time and effort to come along and participate. The education and awareness part of the project, so providing clear information to improve understanding of the energy use, but also promote positive attitudes towards energy efficiency. Behaviour change approach. So we're obviously looking for people to change the way they're using their energy. So using integrated long-term approaches to help participants act on their new knowledge and sustain the changes. And that's the tricky bit. So how is your project going to ensure that people do make change, not just immediately, but longer term as well? And then obviously your energy outcomes. So how are we going to measure and to determine whether the support and the education we have provided has made an impact, so that we can be confident that not just the energy benefits have been realised, but also those non-energy benefits, so comfort in the home and well-being. Moving into budget and resource allocation. So merit criteria number 3, what are we looking for? So we would be looking for a really clear but realistic budget. So that would also include your in-kind contribution that we mentioned earlier. So we want to be seeing that the costs that you're putting into your budget are competitive, realistic, and value for money. We would also want to see that you could replicate elements of your project at minimal cost. So we're not expecting the whole project to be able to be replicated, but there may be elements within your project that you would be able to replicate easily. We also want to see that you've allocated budget to enable you to build long-term capacity within your organisation. So an example of that might be upskilling and educating some team members in energy literacy by bringing in an energy expert to support that work. And I know that we have talked about in-kind contribution a couple of times already, but I thought it'd be worth going through how to calculate that for those organisations that haven't put a dollar value against what that looks like before. So just a reminder that we're looking for at least 10% of your overall project value to represent your in-kind contribution. So the types of in-kind support, what is that? So it could be your volunteer time, so working out what value you would put against the time your volunteers are putting towards the project. Donated goods, donated services, or it might be the use of a space or facility that you have and can make available for this project. And then we're looking at assigning a fair market value to those items. So looking at your volunteer time, so using maybe a standard hourly rate. For example, you could look up the community worker rate or award rate, wage. For goods, it might be using a retail or wholesale price. Services, relevant professional rates you can find, and facilities. So that's, you know, what value would you put against renting similar venues? And then documenting it all. So timesheets of volunteer hours, donation letters or receipts, rental comparisons, or quotes and invoices for services. So there's a table on the application that allows you to document all those things. And then obviously we want the total value. So calculating all those estimated values will give you your in-kind contribution. So moving on to merit criteria number 4. So this is your organisation's capacity and capability to deliver your fabulous projects you put forward. So we want to see that you and your team that you pull together have the relevant experience, capability, and where relevant qualifications to deliver the project. We also want to see that clear project team structure, roles and responsibilities, so it's clear that everybody knows what their role is to deliver the project. We're also looking to see if you developed any partnerships that are going to enhance your project, so whether or not you've brought in some energy experts or trainers or maybe even interpreters to help you deliver your projects. Also, have you got any existing networks and relationships that will support and enhance the project? But also importantly, have you identified any potential risks relating to capacity and capability that you need to mitigate and therefore inform how you designed your project? Moving on to the final merit criteria. So this is the project impact. How are you going to measure how fabulous your projects have been? So we need to have confidence in your application that you have outlined how are you going to measure the outcomes of your activities. So how are you going to show that you have helped those households understand and manage their energy use, and how have they actually reduced their bills? We also want to see how you have, as an organisation, built your own capacity to engage with these groups beyond the grant period. So beyond that June 2027, how can you continue to do such great work? So again, online will tell you a lot of different ways you could collect the information to measure your impact. We've put together this table for you. It's also in the grant guidelines, so you can jump in there and use that as a reference when you get into designing your projects. There's lots of obviously different ways you can measure your impact, and you can see those tools listed across the bottom of the table to help you measure the indicators. So an example in terms of knowledge and awareness might be that you want your vulnerable cohorts to have an increased understanding of energy bills. So you might decide to do a pre-survey, so before the workshop or the face-to-face engagement, and then you might want to do a post survey. So it might be immediately after the engagement, or it might be 3, 5, 6 months after, to kind of see how they've put things into practice. You might want to look at actual energy use reduction. So you might want to look into getting your cohorts permission to see their energy bills, and you can see the before and after comparisons to see what impact their changes have made. And also the co-benefits you might be looking into. So obviously we are looking for energy use reduction, but we would also be really keen to understand what non-energy benefits have come out of the work that you have delivered. So looking at those comfort and health and well-being things. So you might look at doing some interviews with some of the participants after the event to see how the changes have made them feel. They might feel more empowered. They might decide that they can be more comfortable in their home without the fear of those bills being driven up. So there's a lot of different ways you can measure your impact. So please use this as a reference point in the guidelines when you get to thinking about this element of your project. And the next step is our application process. So let's jump in. And I wanted to start by just going through some key dates that are very important to all of you. So the opening date is obviously been and gone now because you're watching this video. But yes, the 22nd of September was when it was launched. And the closing date, so the last point at which you can submit your applications, will be at 11:59 on the 3rd of November. So make sure you get those submitted before midday on the 3rd. We plan to then jump straight into the assessment process. So there'll be the eligibility criteria assessed first, and then we'll move into the merit assessment. And that process will happen from that point onwards. We don't know how long that's going to take, but we aim to get information back to you on the outcomes early 2026. If not, earlier if we can. So we will work as quickly and as efficiently as we can to get that process done, so we can let you know. And then in terms of delivery timeframe, it will be, and I know we've mentioned this date before in terms of 2027, June 27, but it will be from as soon as the funding deed has been signed by both the department and yourselves, all the way through to the end date, which will be June 2027. All right, so we use an online grants management system to manage all the applications. So the only place you can submit will be online. And so there'll be that you'll have to find the link on the web page. So please jump back onto there to find the link. Once you get onto the online system, you click on Start the Submission tab. And what will happen then is you'll need to fill out some information about yourself, which will automate an application number for you. You will always need to quote that number when you send us any information or any queries to the mailbox or any point in the process. So keep hold of that number and make sure you note that down. Other things to note is, as well as filling out the form online, you can upload any documents to support your application. So you may want to, say, upload some CVs to support merit criteria number 3, which is the capacity and capability deliverable, merit criteria, sorry. We don't accept applications in any other way. So we will not accept hard copies or any applications that are emailed to us. We can't accept late or ineligible applications. And also, it's very important that there's no false or misleading information. If you jump to our ethical conduct section of the guidelines, you'll see that that's very clearly noted there. So please make sure that any information that you're putting in your application is true and accurate. Whilst we're doing the assessment process, or if there's any issues with the application submission, we will get in contact with you just to request either some more information or just to double check if anything doesn't look quite right. So talking a bit more about that online platform, so it is called Smarty Grants, and I'll go through just a few tips and tricks to help you along the way. But before I start, I will note that there is an application help guide that can be found on the webpage. And if you go to that guide, there's also some FAQs that you can access too. But just to start, a few key things I'd say is the first thing is that you can save your progress and return at another time. So you don't need to complete the whole application in one go. You can come and go as you please. So yes, just make sure you save your progress each time you log off, and you can come back in and out as many times as you like. The other thing will be that it is stored online rather than a device. So that means you can access it on not only the laptop or the computer that you start the application, but also on your mobile and any other device. The other thing to note is that when you submit your application, you will get an automated email, so you can be confident that your submission has been received by us. If you do not get that email, please reach out to us or double check your application and that you haven't got any errors in the application. But please do reach out if you're panicking about the fact that you haven't received this email, and we can just check that for you at our end. So actually setting up your application in the first place, you will need to create a profile for your organization. And once you've registered that email address, you won't need to register again. I don't know if your computer allows you to save passwords, but that might be something you might want to do. The other thing is recommended is to just make a bookmark for that particular page. If you're going to be coming and going to it over the next few weeks until the submission date, you might want to just make sure that's saved. So there's usually a little star up at the top of the web in your address bar that enables you to save that to your favorites. Another tip is that, well, just information is that you will receive an activation email once you've created that profile. Now, it doesn't come necessarily instantly. It might take up to 15 minutes. And I'd also recommend, if you do not receive it within that time, to check your junk or your spam mail folders, because it's been known to go there as well. So if you do not receive that email, again, you can reach out to us via the email that you'll have on the last slide, and we can just check that for you and see what's going on. In terms of actually filling out the application, probably the most important piece of information is to press save often. So it's not automated in terms of saving. It doesn't do automation saves. So please make sure that you don't lose the work that you're putting into this application. For example, you may get timed out, or you might by accident shut the tab and lose the information. So please, if I can give you one piece of advice out of all of this information, is to continually press save so you don't lose your work. The other thing is a navigation panel. So you don't necessarily have to work through the application systematically. There's pages for different elements of the application. So there's kind of an intro about your project, and then there'll be a page for each of the merit criteria. And so you can jump in between each of those as you like. Again, pressing save, put anything in. Other things to note is that there's often hint text under questions that will help you understand the kind of information we're expecting in that particular question or table. And last thing is, yes, the attachments. And I know, again, I've mentioned it previously, but you can provide us with attachments to support your application. And that section is right at the end before you press submit. So you won't find that section of the application until the final page. So look out for that too. So I also wanted to talk to you about some free grant writing support that we've made available for you all. The first one is a free grant writing workshop that is for all applicants of the grant. We have an external consultant who is an expert in grant writing delivering that session, and she'll talk about some best practice application techniques. She'll also get you thinking about how you can effectively respond to some selection criteria. She'll also help you define clear, measurable project outcomes that align with our grant objectives. So again, really recommend you jumping in and registering for that on the web page. We also have some free one-on-one application support available to people who are applying for Category 1 grant. So that's the grant that is from $50,000 to $150,000. So that is also with external consultants. So it's independent of the government. So there will be no conflict of interest when we come to assess them. And that will be to support you with developing and articulating your project, defining your objectives and outlining clear and effective plans to meet those objectives. They can also review your application and provide verbal feedback. They cannot write your application, and there is up to 3 hours worth of support available. Please register for that on our webpage by 5 p.m. on Monday, the 29th of September. After that time, you will not be able to register and access that support. So that's very important to make sure that if you do want that one-to-one free support, you do that by 5 p.m. on Monday, the 29th. All right, moving on to the assessment process and the grantee selection. So the assessment process will commence on the 3rd of November, which is the date that your applications will be submitted. So we will start looking at those from 12 p.m. onwards. And the first step in the assessment process is checking eligibility. So we will need to make sure that all of the applicants have met all 4 of the eligibility criteria. If you have, then you will be moved onto the merit assessment process. If you are not eligible, then unfortunately we will not be considering you for the grant. So the merit assessment will be going through the criteria and scoring you against that criteria, and that will be done by an assessment panel of 3 independent assessors who have not been part of the program design or stakeholder engagement process to get to this point. We also have an independent probity advisor that will be available at all of the meetings and support the assessment panel, just to make sure that everything is fair and equitable for the process. Once the merit assessment has been carried out by the independent panel members, we will come together and rank based on the scores from highest to lowest in terms of scores for each category, and those with the highest scores, the highest ranked, will be recommended for the grant. The director of the Community and Homes Programs branch will be the delegate and the decision maker for those grants. Based on that decision, we hope that we can let all applicants know the outcome in writing by early 2026. Obviously, we were working through the assessment process as quickly as possible. We also need to make sure that we do it correctly, fairly, and make sure that we're gathering all the information that we need to do that assessment correctly. So if in early 2026 you find out you have been successful, we'll just run through the next phase for you quickly. So if you are a successful applicant, this is what you will expect in terms of the tasks and the steps that we'd need to take. So obviously we would notify you that you have been successful. The next step would be to execute a funding deed between your organisation and the department, and that will act as the official deed. So that will outline the payment schedules, the deliverables that will keep your organisation accountable to throughout the life of the project. We will also then expect to receive your project management plan, which will also include a risk register. We can provide a template for that. And once that has happened, we can provide you with the first milestone payment. Now, throughout the life of the project, we will be having regular progress meetings with your organisation just to check in and see how everything is tracking, checking how the budget is going, checking how the deliverables are going in terms of in relation to your project plan. We will also be expecting a mid-term progress report and then an end of term report as well. So before we wrap up, I know we've talked about dates, but I just wanted to go over them one last time. Obviously, we've already launched this grant opportunity, so you can apply from any point on from now. But yes, the important date for you all to know is the 3rd of November at 12 p.m. So you have Monday morning to finalise that application and press the submit button. But yes, please, by midday on the 3rd of November, please make sure that you get your applications in, and then we'll jump straight into the assessment process and try and get through that as quickly and as efficiently as we possibly can. Application outcome date, early 2026, but as early as we possibly can, so that you guys can get cracking with your projects. All right, let's finish off with an email address for you. So if you do want to get in contact with us with any inquiries or questions that aren't clear from the webpage, you may have a complaint. You may also have a conflict of interest that you might want to notify us about. Please get in contact at communityenergyprograms@dq.nsw.gov.au and address it to myself, and we will get back to you as quickly as we can. I will wrap up by saying thank you so much for listening and taking an interest in this grant. I hope that this information has been helpful and will assist you in moving forward to the application stage. Please make sure that you take advantage of our free services, and if you ever need to check any of the information, it will all be up on the webpage. So that's me for now. Thank you very much for listening.